I'm really delighted and excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Dean Carlos Ayala. Do you want to? And family. And I want to tell you a little bit about Dean Ayala. I think you're noticing that the deans, before getting to this point, have all had very interesting and exciting lives, which continue here at SSU. So Dr. Ayala is the interim dean of the School of Education. He graduated from UC Santa Cruz in 1985 with a double major in chemistry and environmental studies, with an emphasis on the production of alcohol from agricultural wastes. You didn't bring any of that with you, did you? No. Okay, good. Okay. After college, he worked for a short stint with the United Energy Corporation in Borrego Springs, which is near Palm Springs, making pure alcohol and methane gas using solar energy and waste molasses. When that job closed down, he then joined the teaching profession as a bilingual middle school science and math teacher in Calexico, California. He then became an elementary school principal of a Title I achieving school with 760 students, just the number that we have in this class. While a principal, he earned his master's degree in education from San Diego State University, and after a couple of years as principal, he went on to his doctoral program at Stanford University, where he studied how to find out what kids know and are able to do in science. His specialty is performance tasks where students have to carry out experiments and explain what they did and what they discover. He arrived at Sonoma State in 2002 to join his brother, who was a professor here at the time. While he was at SSU, he prepared future science teachers. He has received nearly $3 million in National Science Foundation and other grants in science education to design simulations with avatars, rescuing skiers on snow slopes, exploring lakes in the Amazon, or docking space stations near Mars. He currently has a grant that gives up to $30,000 to any science or math major if they become a science teacher. It's called the NOICE program. So think about that. If you're a science person, you might want to talk to Dean Ayala about becoming a teacher. While the School of Education accepts all majors into the school, because of the need for good science and math teachers, there's lots of money available to support them. Dr. Ayala is also an adventurer, having driven to the tip of South America and back, camping along the way. He visited most states in the U.S. and has explored many wilderness regions in this hemisphere and explored the back roads of Baja California, backpacking in the desert to find oasis and gemstones. He dreams of playing Survivor Man. Les Stroud, not Bear Grylls. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, but okay, you can explain to me later. He and his two daughters go backpacking in the dead of winter with crampons and lots of warm clothes. He and his wife are adventurers and started a club at their middle school where they would take students camping, hiking, fishing, and exploring throughout the Southwest. He has led hundreds of kids to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and almost all of them have come back. He also is a really excellent winemaker. He's very proud of himself when he eats meals where every product at the table is something that he has caught in the wild or grown in his garden or orchard. If you want to do some digging or planting, he would love for you to let him know. He always needs help. Also has problems with gophers, I think. Finally, Dr. Ayala is a family man with two daughters, aged 20 and 21. One is a current SSU senior in kinesiology, who will be at SSU one more year, and his other daughter, after completing 2 years at SSU, is moving to San Francisco City College and San Francisco State University. And I also want to say I've worked with Dr. Ayala for the last 10 years. We were fellow faculty in the School of Education, and he is a good friend and a great scholar. So welcome, Dean Ayala.
John, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you, John. There are drawbacks and good things about having your kids be at the same school where you work. The drawback is having a senior who's been here since a freshman is that during registration time, I get thousands of texts. What do you think I get texts about? Anybody? What classes are you taking? No, I get those texts because I ask and I try to inquire prior to, because I have to remind my daughter to go seek advising. I have to tell her that 100 times a semester, right? And eventually she goes out and gets advising. What I get texts about is, Dad, I can't get into this class. Can you help me? And I'm sure you experience the same things. Well, you already heard that she's a senior now. She's going to be here for her 5th year because she struggled with getting classes too. And we're actively working on it. Actually, John Kornfeld I have this, so I'm okay. Thank you. John Kornfeld is working on these issues. The other thing I want to let you know is that I've been in this education business now since 1985. That's when I left the company where I was making fuel alcohol, and I became a teacher. That's where I met my wife. We were teachers together. My wife currently is an assistant principal at Elsie Allen High School in Santa Rosa. Is there anybody here from Elsie today? Anybody here from Santa Rosa today? Great, welcome. So today, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk about schools. And I'm going to talk about all different things related to schools and how you are connected to all those things related to schools. So these are my objectives for today. These are the things that you're going to do. I will post these slides at the end of the day so you can have them. But if you want to jot down some notes, the titles will be the same. Oh, I want to go back. There's one other thing I want you to look at. Did anybody try to go to this website yet? Did you get in? No? Do you have a computer with you today? Okay. If someone has a computer, go ahead and try to get onto that, because I have D. Where are you, D? D's over there in the back, and we have a back channel going. So if you don't feel comfortable asking a question by raising your hand and me calling on you, then you can send a question to that, and D will relate that information to me. All right? So D, let me know if somebody sends you a little note, okay? We need sound over there.
Just a note that you need to log into the Sonoma web first before you can get to today's meet with your normal Moodle login.
Okay, so we're going to talk about schools today. These are my objectives for today. We're going to look at changes in schools. We're going to be talking about the history and how you're connected to that history. I'm going to bring up some of the things that Dr. Leader talked about. You remember those things? The incremental change, the unplanned and the planned changes. I'll be talking about that. You will be using that for some of our activities. You're going to propose a school change opportunity, and I'll talk more in detail about that. And you're going to do some community service. These are the tasks that you will have to do to complete my section of the course. So a lot of these things are just very simple things, you know, talking to each other here. These things with dates next to them are the things that are actually assignments that you need to complete. And on Wednesday in class, I'm going to go over each one of those things. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them, but I'm very excited about all these different opportunities that you have. Okay. School. School is this institution, is this space. And I believe that you are all experts at doing school. Those of you who completed the survey for today's class, I took the average number of years that you've been in school, and what do you think that average was? Why don't you the person sitting next to you, give an estimate of what you think that is. How many years was the average number of years that all of you have been in school? You should practice saying that, because I'm going to call on people's names. I have a list of names here. I want to hear what your answer is. So go ahead and give it a practice. How long have you been in school? How many years? Okay, let's start with Cameron Kaiser. Where are you, Cameron? Raise your hand, Cameron. Is Cameron here? Section WCC. Hey, What's your guess?
Somebody else?
I can't hear you. He just got out of the restroom. How many years you been in school?
He says 15.
15?
15, yes.
Okay, 15, right? I heard 15. All right, so 15. Yeah, that's about right. So you've been in school, if you count kindergarten, that's 1 year, 12 years of high school, and then after 12 years of high school, you may be a junior or you may be a senior, so you add a couple of things. I'm sure some of my illustrious colleagues over here have graduated from the 20th grade. By the time you're done, you'll be at the 16th grade, 17th grade, you'll be done. So you are experts. You are experts at doing school. You are a very elite group, all of you. Because in order to have reached this point, you went through a whole bunch of things to get here. You followed some rules. And today I'm going to argue that those rules and regulations and things that you follow started way back when schools first started. And actually, there's been absolutely very little change since the very first schools were started. And you'll see remnants of that throughout this course and your entire career. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is I want you to come up with a list of things that characterizes what schools are. What are the things that make up school? What are those things? And I recommend that you write down this list and you share it with the person next to you. Try to craft a list together. I'm looking at probably 6 different things. I'm going to give you the first one just to give you an example. Schools have teachers, right? That's one. What else? What are some of the other things schools have? Okay, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that. And I'm going to call on the next section. 5 minutos. What's your list?
Oh yeah, we're saying it out loud.
Okay, I would write it down because you're going to have to say it, right? TAs, if you go around asking them how they're doing on their list, would be great. They should be writing these down because we're going to collect them. By the way, Cameron, thank you. What are the things that characterize schools? If you were to go to another planet and there were schools there, what would you see? Or what would an alien see if they came to our place and they saw a school? What would be the features, the things you would point out? The lottery. Okay, I would like your attention back here. Wrap up your list. We're going to construct a list for the whole class, okay? And so when I call on you, all I want you to do is give me the name of one of the things that you thought about that schools have to have. We'll talk about that just a little bit, and then we'll move on to another person, okay? So it's going to be a very brief little thing that you have to say, but you got to be clear. I have hearing loss, so you got to yell if you don't have a mic, okay? Let's go with Stephen Orengo. Where are you, Stephen? He's on the back right side. Where? Stephen, you're not here? No. Okay, Stephen's absent. All right. Well, we'll go back to that same place. How about Peyton? Oh, they're all looking. Okay, Peyton, what was one of the things that you came up with? Books, all right? Books, that's another part of school, right? And the books can be different kinds of pieces, but books are an important part of school. So maybe when we think about when school started, we have to think about right around 1492 and that kind of area, right in that time frame right there when Christopher Columbus sailed, but that's when the Gutenberg press was created. And during that time, a lot of books were being generated. Before that, people wrote all the books out by hand. That was a lot of work. Okay, books. Great. Hey, Peyton, thank you very much. Okay. Let's reach into another section. Alyssa Schwartz. There we go. Nice and loud. Money and funding, right? So there's some sort of institutional support, right? There's some sort of organization, there's some sort of structure that gives money to make those things happen. Where does that money come from? For what purpose? These are questions that we have to ask. So we know about books. We know about things related to the institution and money that are key components of this. Let's reach into the hat and pull somebody else out. Ryan Orgren? Ryan Orgren.
He's not here.
Oh, he's not here. Okay. Connor Baird or Bard? Wow. Casey Sears. Where's Casey? Okay, Casey. Okay, you have administrators. What other kind of people are at schools? Students, good. What other kind? And students. All right, that's good enough, right? So we're going to have like some people in charge, teachers and administrators, and then we're going to have students that are part of schools. We have books, and then we have the institution and some sort of funding that comes in. All right, let's ask another one. What about Eric Gronley? Hey, Eric. Where's your list? Curriculum, okay? The stuff that is taught, right? That's another thing that you have in your school. So if we had an alien come in, they would see people, right, the teachers, and they would see the students, they would see the books, they would see the institution, they would see the funding, and then they would see the action of teaching, the action of giving out information and of students learning information. And we can look at our history, we can go back and we can find examples of that. Okay, we're going to do one last thing. Okay, Frank Bay. Frank, are you here? Maybe sitting next to Jesse Reed. Okay, Frank's not here. What about Jesse? Jesse Red, is that right? Okay, Jesse, do you have anything else to add? Yeah, students, that's an important piece. You need to speak loudly. Classroom space, right? We have some sort of space that needs to be in place that is part of what actually happens in the classroom. Look at this classroom, 760 students. This is as many students that I had in my elementary school with like 30 some classrooms. So you can imagine that if we came from outer space, we would see places where people get together. Let's recap it. I'm going to kind of coalesce it into a list that we are going to use for this time here in this little section that we're doing. Okay? So we have books. And associated with books are pens and papers, charts, chalkboards, whiteboards, computer monitors, projectors, screens, all the stuff, all the trappings, right? So if you went to, if we had someone come in from a foreign place and they came in and looked and they said, could this be a school? Could there be teaching and learning going on in here? They're going to see those things. They're going to see the institution with the funding. They're going to see the teachers, the people in charge, the experts, right? And they are going to see the students who are learning that material. They're also going to see the curriculum, the pedagogy. How is it that we go out and we interact with you? And you're going to see rewards and punishments. What were some of the rewards and punishments that you got when you were in school? Not by your parents, but by the school. Share it with someone sitting next to you. What's one reward and one punishment you got? So when I said to my daughter, what are some of the rewards and punishments you got? She said, gold stars in detention. Okay, that's very classic, right? You know, if you look at people at our age group, like John and myself, you know, we got paddled. That was something that happened in school. We would get lined up and we would get paddled. So there's all of these rewards and punishments that are part of being school. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of reorganize that list and think about it a little bit, and we're going to move on to the next idea. Could you come help me here a second, Barbara or John? Can you come here a second?
I'm sorry?
Can you come help me a second? I want to. Well, you know what? I'm not going to do it that way. It's okay, John. I'm going to skip it. Thanks. I'm going to skip what I was going to do.
Okay.
Okay?
Just call.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so here's the list that I want you to think about, all right? Because these are the key pieces I'm going to talk about. I'm going to say them out loud, so you need to write them down. The institution, right? We talked about the funding and those components. Teachers and administrators. That's the other thing that are classic pieces of school. And of course, you could come up with your own things, right? We also have the set curriculum, right? The stuff that gets taught, those A through G requirements. Who designs A through G? You know what A through G is, right? That's what got you here. Who decides that? That's an interesting question. Okay, we have pupils and students. We have all the school trappings. We have things like books, papers, pencils. You can imagine this day, would you see ballpoints, pens here? No, most likely you would see ink wells, right? And this is where you get the stories of the kid sitting behind the girl with a ponytail, dipping her ponytail in the ink. And it probably was that guy right there in the corner, you think? This guy right here? And you know, they didn't have any shoes. This is West Virginia, 1921. Right, and then we have rewards and punishments. Those are the themes I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the day today. One more time, institution, teachers, principals, set curriculum, that's 3, the pupils, the school trappings, and rewards and punishments. Okay. So, I asked you to complete a survey. We asked for you to complete. 126 of you did complete the survey. So this is for those 126 who completed the survey. This is the results. I'm going to open up the survey again because I really would like more people to give more information. So this really shows you who you are. Okay, so mostly females responded. And most of you have a major. That's great news because that's one of the roads to graduation. And on average, you've been in school for about 14.3 years, and that's about 20,000 hours. That's a lot of school you've been through, right? And some of it was probably very exciting and very invigorating, and others was you just wanted to get through it. But that's a long time to be in school. And I will argue that you are an expert at doing school. And this is key because all this is going to relate directly to you. Now, today when I talk about schools and how schools have changed, I'm going to be talking about some very specific examples. But I'm not going to be able to talk about everything that's happening all over the world because it's there's lots of innovation, lots of interesting things happen, but there is a lot of differences geographically of what happens in schools. So this is from the UN Development Program. These are world literacy rates. Typically, 14-year-olds who can read and write and cipher, right? This is typically what literacy is talked about. Now you'll notice that we have this kind of range here. I was wondering if in the back you can see those numbers. You can't? Well, let me just give you some broad strokes here. Okay, so right down here it's 95 to 100%. You'll notice Russia, Europe, the United States, Canada, Greenland, Argentina, Chile, Australia, they have really high rates of literacy. So more than, if you had 10 people in the room, 9 of them would be literate, 14-year-olds. But that means there's one not literate. Have you ever met anybody who couldn't read and write? I met someone who couldn't read and write once. We were driving down in a state that's near Texas, and we had our car broke down, and I was sitting there with a friend of mine. She was my buddy's girlfriend, and we actually did not get along very well. And so, my buddy and his family had to go get the tow van to come and get us, da-da-da. But this guy drove up and asked us if he wanted a tow, and he was a tow truck company. And he said to me, "Here, I need you to fill out this form because I can't read and write." And I look at him, and he looks at me, and he says, "Well, if you can't read and write, maybe your wife does. She almost killed me because she didn't really like me very much." But it was really strange not being able to read or write. There are still lots of countries where people cannot read and write. As I go down this list, you can come down here. This is 0 to 49%, right? So 10 people, half of them in these countries of Central Africa here, half the people can't read or write. So when I talk about the innovations in school and some of the things that happened in school, what I'm going to talk about are some specific places and events, but you have to imagine that across the world, it happens disproportionately. Right? There's going to be examples. Well, I know of this thing that happened over here, or I know of that special university where we had a female back in 1502 that graduated. There's going to be some little examples like that. But I'm going to talk about general trends. All right? And when I think about schools, I like to think about what life was like before schools. Wouldn't that have been great, life before schools? I wonder what it would be like. Right? When I think about history of schools, I like to think about 3 different areas, 3 different time periods. 1 million years ago, that's a long time, 100,000 years ago, and 10,000 years ago. That's what I like to think about. Let's talk about 1 million years ago. Homo erectus, Africa, northern Africa, the savannas. They had kids. They did not have schools. What were some of the things that Homo erectus families would have to teach their children? Not in schools. What would those be? Share with someone next to you. One thing. We'll call on somebody. Where's my list? What would they have to teach? Emma Defina. Emma. Sitting there next to, where are you, Emma? Not here, wow. I guess people must be suffering so much because the 49ers lost last night. But it was a great game. Go 49ers. Okay? What about Jen Tyson? Cameron, do you know where Jen is? Oh, there you are. What was one thing they would have to teach? How to find food, right? The basic survival stuff. Honey, don't eat those berries. Or here, this is how you skin a gazelle. Or this is the way you take fire from one place and bring it to another location. They would have to teach basic survival skills. And maybe there'd be little discussions during that time about, history, a little bit of history they would have to teach. But for the most part, what they're going to do is teach basic survival skills. They used fire, but they didn't manage it. So there's no evidence in the archaeological record of them making like little circles, little campfires during this time 100 million years ago. But at 100,000 years ago, we start seeing fire being used by the Neanderthals and the Cro-Magnons, right? They're kind of mixed together. Some people are saying that there's a connection between the two. Maybe there was some interbreeding between the two. And during this time are some very important examples of things that you might know about. What did we find in some caves in France? Paintings, right? There's some paintings in France that these people made. So we know now that during that time period, they were beginning to tell stories. They were beginning to share information with their children. There's no evidence of any kind of institution and teachers and pupils and the trappings of school. But what they had to relay this information, and they did it mostly in stories. And so from 1 million years ago to 100,000 years ago, people used stories to tell things. I'm going to tell you 3 lines. I'm going to say 3 things to you, 3 sentences. I want to see if you can put them together, okay? First thing, oh, Charles is not here. Charles is not here, first thing. Second thing, I wonder where Charles is. I saw a green VW in front of Charlotte's house. Can you put that story together? What could be going on? What's that? Share with someone sitting next to you. Can you think of a story? Where is Charles? Charles should be here. There's a green VW in front of Charlotte's house. All right, some hypothesis you might make is that Charles has a green VW and is in front of Charlotte's house. That could be some story you tell. We search these things out in our life. We try to find stories. And that's part of our evolution. We tell stories to each other. Those stories that we tell help us understand the world around them. They had perfected that. Part of our mind uses that information to make that happen. This is 100,000 years ago. Still, no evidence of schools. None of those trappings. And then, 10,000 years ago, 1 million, 100,000, 10,000 is when we have the first strong evidence of the domestication of plants. This is a fascinating area. I hope there's some anthropologists in here who would like to study that. If you're an anthro major, raise your hand. Great. I hope you study this because this is fascinating, right? So at some point we started growing stuff. We started growing wheat and we started raising animals. This is from Egypt about 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the current era, so 4,000 years ago. And this is when people started doing this. The trappings or the things that went along with the domestication of animals were cities. Cities became an important feature. And part of that feature was that there started to be people in charge. Not just like a leader of a clan, but like queens and pharaohs and kings. And they had big, huge amounts of land. And they wanted to keep track of all of that grain they were making. They wanted to be able to keep records about what's going on. Plus, they wanted to be able to have all of the stories somehow organized and put together so that they didn't have to always tell them, that they could put them in some place. So the necessity to organize and collect all this information led to writing. And with writing, some very interesting things started to happen. I'd like to introduce you to my friend. Okay, this guy is great. If you're an archaeologist and you study ancient cultures, you'll read about him. Samuel Noah Kramer died not too long ago. This guy was a real Indiana Jones. He would go to the area between the Tigris and Euphrates River in the current country of Iraq, and he would look at some civilizations there. And he specialized in studying the writing of these people, cuneiform writing, or cuneiform, there's two pronunciations, of writing. And he found some very interesting things in that language, and some of you probably have read some of this work. Gilgamesh comes from this time period. You may have read that in high school or one of your classes here. It comes from these kinds of writings way back when people were organizing them. Here are some examples. Wow. Interesting. Looks like the beginning of books, right? So the one over here is text. This right here, that's geometry and algebra. So they were writing these things down on clay tablets. Now Kramer found some very interesting clay tablets that he couldn't explain for a long time. Right? He found them in this kind of small space in one of the cities, and there were a couple of tablets that didn't make sense to him. One of the tablets that he found was a tablet with some writing on one side, on this side right here, but nothing over here. The other kind of tablet he found was that he would find writing on tablets where this was identical to that. Wow. What the hell was that all about? Then he started translating this stuff. That's where Gilgamesh comes from, the translation of that. So stuff from the Bible is in there, in these texts. One of the things that he found was he found something called school days. He found about the life of a child back in this area between the Tigris and Euphrates River, living in adobe villages. And these children, some of the children, went to school. And it's amazing. You need to read this when you get a chance, if you're interested. I'm going to give you the highlights of it. But so what he found was this place that I'm going to argue is the first school, right? So that tablet that had writing on one side and not on the other, hey, the kids were copying it, right? Okay, you sit down. Cameron, you sit down and you copy your writing, right? You can imagine doing spelling, right? You're in 4th grade. Here's the spelling list for the week. You're going to have a quiz at the end of the day or the end of the week. And so you would sit there and you would practice that, right? So that's what they did back then too. This is 2,000 years before the current era, 4,000 years ago. He also found the blank ones, those were ones getting ready. The teacher got ready for the day before, right? They would write out the story about school days, or they would write out the stories about the kings, and the kids would have to copy it. When you read school days, this is what you have. It's long. It's probably about 2 pages of Word doc of the whole story, okay? So you read this, and the first time I read it, I was just blown away, okay? So the first line is, I read my tablet, I ate my lunch. His mom asked, what did you do in school today? I read my tablet, I ate my lunch, I prepared my tablet, I wrote it, and I finished it. I prepared my tablet. What's that? Well, prepared the clay thing, right? They had to be able to do that. You don't have to make paper, but you can open a Word doc, right? So it's the same sort of thing. His mother made him lunch on his way to school the next day. His mother made him some rolls. I wonder what rolls are between the Tigris and Euphrates River 4,000 years ago. Probably some sort of unleavened bread with some hummus maybe on the inside, maybe some lentils. Wrapped it up. You can imagine this little kid going to school. The mother wrapped it up, and he takes all of his food, and he takes his writing that he needs to do, and because he had homework. Children had homework back then, and when he came to school, he was late, and he was terrified about the gatekeeper who was there. But the gatekeeper let him go through this first time. Wow, I think we do the same thing here too, don't we? We close those doors. We have gatekeepers. And he talks about rewards and punishments. So he was caned. You know, bamboo switch, whack. He was caned for getting out of his seat out of turn. He got caned for not writing or spelling correctly. You're doing little symbols. You're not putting those little symbols right. Whack! Do it better. He got caned for talking to his teacher. And the kid was devastated, right? He had a really bad week, all this terrible stuff that was happening with him. So he goes home and he asks his parents, please, please, can we invite the teacher over for dinner? And so the teacher comes, agrees to come. And the teacher comes into the house where the little kid is, and they sit the teacher in the seat of honor. And in that seat of honor, when they're sitting there, they give the teacher gifts. Yeah, the teacher likes it and says, may the gods of the scribes bless you. And that's the end of the story. But this is 2,000 years ago on clay tablets. You remember those things that we talked about? The institution, the teacher, the pupils, the trappings of school, the curriculum, the rewards and punishments. They all started right here. This is where they all begin. And we still see all those artifacts today. Everything, you know, these little notepads that you're all writing on, that's the same thing. Same idea. And it all starts way back here. And I'm arguing to you that schools have not changed at all during that time. Yeah, sure, we have more stuff to know. But this is the essence of it. These are the pieces of it. Now, I'm going to do some jumping of history. I could sit here and we could talk about the Byzantine empires, we could talk about the Egyptian, blah, 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 forever and ever. I'm going to just highlight some important times in school. And if you wanted to spend a little more time researching the other ones, great. You'll have an opportunity for that, actually. Okay, but I want to jump to the Renaissance. Okay, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. This is the time when we start seeing the printing press. This is the time when we start seeing Leonardo da Vinci. We start seeing the great painters during this time period. That's when it starts. Okay? One of the important things that came out of this was the Gutenberg press. Right? This is Mr. Gutenberg. He's the person who actually developed movable type, the type of printing press where you actually write a letter and you can move them. And he actually started creating books. So the number of books that people had started escalating very widely during this time. Here's a painting done during this time period reflecting a scholar, reflecting someone like myself or John or Barbara or one of the other deans or one of your other professors. This is kind of what we would look like back then, right? These were the days. This is like a school setting. What are some of the things that you see there that you would see here today? With someone sitting next to you, tell them, what are some of the things that you see here that you could see today if you came to my office? And we'll reach into our lucky pockets. What are some of those things? It's during the time when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Okay, Matthew Cinco or Matthew Cinco. I don't know how you pronounce your last name. Matthew, where are you? Matthew he's in your group D. Is he here today? Oh, wow. Must be a Ravens fan. What about Haley Wilson? Nope. Oh, what about Morgan Kink? Morgan? Are you there? All right, Morgan. What's one of the things you see that you might see in my office today? Dee, can you repeat what you said? I can't hear.
She said she thinks there's a test.
Some text?
Test?
Tests? Sure. There's a lot of papers. Oops, sorry. There's a lot of papers around here. He's busy copying, right? They didn't have copiers. And during this time, before the Gutenberg Bible, really, the Gutenberg press started going, monks specialized in writing stuff down. We did a lot of copying back then. Teachers did a lot of copying back then. But there's textbooks. Here's a clock, right? Got to be here at 8 o'clock or we're going to close those doors and we're not going to let you in. So clearly, these were some of the trappings of school, right? Pens and paper. He was using an ink quill. He had special clothes on. When do I wear special clothes? During graduation. They're called robes, they're called gowns, right? But what they are these things, and there's a separate piece that's called a hood. Hey, he's got a hood on. The use of those things for graduation starts around this time. 1492, around that time period, give or take 100 years. Okay? The other important thing that happened during this time that just resonates here in this place is the humanistic tradition. During this time, Desiderius Erasmus, a Dutch philosopher, thinker, started saying some very important things. He says, it's no longer important that you just memorize stuff. It's important that you understand stuff. How many times have you been asked to think critically? Maybe 1 billion times. Think critically. We want you to do a critical analysis of this. Be more critical. All those kinds of language. That starts from here. This is when it starts. And during that time, people carried out practical and scientific studies. They studied lots of stuff. They studied history. They studied writing. They studied philosophy. They studied ethics. They studied the Greeks, the Iliad, the Odyssey. You may have read some of those things. You're connected to this whole chain of events. And the significance of why we should have education like this was to educate society, so people could be an informed citizen. You hear that language here today. This is 1492, in that time range. However, things may have been a little bit different. Here's a picture of a young kid with golden locks, a male, and he's learning from his teacher right here. And he is of the aristocrats. He is a noble's son. And he has access to all of this education. Most of the people did not have access to education. If you were a peasant and you were working in the fields, making the grain that you then gave to the king or to whoever the noble person was in your area, what you did is that you didn't go to school because if you were born of a potter's family, guess what? You're going to be a potter. If you were born of a woodcutter's family, you would be a woodcutter. But nobility and some of the tradespeople actually started having schools where people could go. And if you were a male and of aristocrat background, you were given lots of opportunities to go to school. You might even have people like Michelangelo be your tutor, your private tutor like this. And if I was very wealthy, I would hire somebody like that for my kids. So when you think about it, there was something a little bit different maybe from the way it is right now and back then, because there were a lot of people who didn't have access to school. Do you all have access to school? Pretty much. K-12, pretty much. It's expected. I want to jump forward now. Another big time leap. I want to talk about the 13 colonies. What do you think about schools during the 13 colonies time? Share with someone who's sitting next to you what you might know about that. Okay, 13 colonies, 1600s. What happened in schools? Well, there's pictures. Pictures tell us 1,000 words. Here's a school. This is a description of a school. During this time period, schools were run by villages typically. They were organized by villages, and it'd be a school person who was in charge, a teacher who would be in charge, typically a female, typically not a mother, typically unwed. If one of these women were to inadvertently get pregnant, she probably would be removed from her job. We see a whole range of kids here. We see both boys and girls going to school, and during this time period, boys and girls did go to school for a limited exposure, and they taught them how to read. And some of the reading they had to do is that they had to read Latin. Why would they have to read Latin? They would learn Latin grammar in grammar school. Why would they have to do that? With the person sitting next to them, hypothesize why. Another thing I want to point out, you know what this is, right? Yeah, exactly. That's a dunce cap, right? Okay, and there's kids who don't pay attention. There's kids texting. Okay, they were largely religious. And why did you need to have a school? Because you needed to keep Satan at bay. You needed to be able to read the Bible so that you could be sure that we could protect ourselves from Satan. Now, the North and the South were a little bit different in what the expectations were. And this would be a school trapping. They didn't have, an iPad. They didn't have clay tablets. They had these things called horn books. This was a piece of cloth. And you would write on that. You can imagine making one of those. That would be cool, huh? That's, I saw these. I thought, hey, this is for making pizza. Okay? And during the time, the lessons were done aloud. Now, when I grew up, my mom's from Argentina, my father's from Mexico, and I had an opportunity to go down to Argentina to go to school when I was in high school. This was when I was 15. And there I went to school, and you know what they made you do in school? They made you do all your homework, and then they would say, Carlos Ayala, pasar adelante. And that means for you, you'd have to come up to the front of the class and you'd have to sit there and tell the teacher everything that you learned the night before. Okay? They did this here too. And there was this use of the doggerel style to be able to create ways of helping you memorize this material that you would then say out to your colleagues or to your fellow students as a test. Let me read this for you. In Adam's fall, we sinned all. The life to men this book attend. The calf doth play after a flay. The dog will bite a thief at night. A dog will bite a thief at night. An eagle's flight is out of fight. And the idle fool will be whipped at school. And you use this to memorize certain kinds of, in this case, the alphabet. Do you know any of those things? Something with his little doggerel style? Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Those are the kinds of ideas that the style that was being used. But the expectation was that people would come up here to the front of school, to the front of the classroom, and they would have to recite these things. Who had access? Boys and girls had access. For elementary, when we moved beyond that to a higher level, for the grammar schools, mostly boys, university, mostly boys. Of course, there was a few exceptions. There's no evidence about Pocahontas going to school. There's no evidence about any of the tribes going to school. When the slaves started arriving, there wasn't any evidence of them going to school either. They didn't need to be educated. But the people in the colonies, the Puritans, they had made sure that they educated their kids. All right? Now I'm going to jump forward. But what I would like to do first is I would like you to think a little bit about that Kramer story that I told you about, those features of the schools here. And I want you to think about schools today and see what sort of things you can make a connection to. And share it with the person in front of you, and we're going to take a 5-minute stretch break. So if you can stand up and move around, that would be great. But talk to your neighbors about this idea. Good, I got more kids' names. I love it. It's just really fascinating to me to just note that, schools really haven't changed in 4,000 years. And, you see all the same kind of artifacts that you see today. But maybe that's just the way it's always going to be. I don't know. I have a hunch that it's not. And I'm going to be talking about that in a little more detail. But if you could find your way back to your seats, that would be great. So let's jump forward here. 13 colonies, dunce caps, horn books. Did you bring your horn book today? Left it at home. I'm sure that the kids probably asked their parents for something for lunch. Mother made a little lunch. Just like the boy in the Sumerian times in Babylonia. Same sort of idea. Certain people got to go to school. Some people got to go to school farther. And we had some writing stuff. Boy, what an improvement paper is over this. This was cloth, actually. I'm glad we don't have to memorize this stuff. What's that little rhyme that we know about how many days there are in a month? How does that go? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? 30 days, half September, blah, 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 I don't know. I just look at my iPhone. Okay, I'm jumping forward. Colonial times, 1700s. We had the Declaration of Independence signed in 1776. Probably there's a lot of stuff that happened to schools during that time. Probably really important stuff too, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm leaving that open for a particular reason. But now I want to jump to 1870. 1870, we started collecting statistics about who was literate or who was illiterate. These are people who could not read. The percent of people who could not read. What I would like you to do is, with the person sitting next to you, explain what you see and give a hypothesis for it. You have 2 minutes. Aliens are coming. This is a test of the emergency broadcasting system.
It's flashing on here, which tells me it's not a transmission problem.
Where's my horn book?
Flashing? Is it
okay,
working
maybe
now?
I'll hold. Hold? Yeah, it's working now.
No,
Okay.
it's actually flashing now. It was flashing.
Okay, all right, we got it. Okay. All right. Hypothesis. What's going on? Yeah. Right on.
So you think if you went to the next slide, it would stop?
No, I guess not.
No, it's not. It's,
I can go get Jerry.
that might be a good idea. Thank you.
All right, we're going to try it another way here.
Is it taking it straight off the flash drive, or is
No,
it
sir.
installed on the...
Not off the flash drive.
Well, Jerry's coming.
All right.
See if they can...
Stay. Got dogs at home. Okay. All right, what is it that you saw? in this data? What is it that you see? Caitlin Melanchek. Are you here today, Caitlin? Caitlin, what do you see in that data that's blinking and blinking? One thing you note, one observation. I need a microphone to her because I can't hear anything. Right there.
That Black and others are more illiterate, but they have also decreased as time has gone on. And
I'm sorry, Caitlin. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move on. Okay? All right. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the data and see if I can see if that doesn't blink. Okay, right. So we see one of the things that you see is you see differences between blacks and whites and blacks and others, Indians probably. And you see that the percent who are illiterate, those people who cannot read and write, a lot more folks of color could not read and write over this time period than the whites can. But both groups definitely got better over time. Okay? Why? What happened? With the person sitting next to you, you should have come up with a hypothesis. So let's see if Emma Zorns has an idea. Emma, are you here? Emma, can you give me a hypothesis? Ask your friends too to help you, because you were sharing with them. What could have caused this? What was the cause of this change? This is good news, right? It used to be back in 1870, 8 out of 10 black children, 14 years old, could not read. By the time we were down in 1959, only 1 could not read. Why?
Were people being allowed in schools?
Yeah, they went to schools. Why was that? What happened? What happened around 1870?
Slavery was abolished?
One more time?
Slavery became less accepted.
Yes, it became more important. Everybody had to become literate. Something happened right before this. What happened right before this? Well, you know what? We need to come up with a doggerel style thing for people to remember for the next time. The Civil War happened, right? Civil War, 1865-ish, that range in there. And what happened then after that is that you had all of these freed people who had been slaves, and they saw a pathway to a better life by going to school. And so we start seeing the benefits of that. More and more people were going to school. People who didn't have access before, they started becoming literate. They could do simple reading and writing. That's not that long ago, folks. That's what, 130 years ago? Sounds like a lifetime. I know for you, when you get to be my age, it's like, oh, that's not that long ago. Okay? And we got to see things like this, and I'll kind of describe it for the people in the back. So here's a school, a white school teacher, a school marm, that an unmarried female, lots of young children of color in a freed men's school. These started popping up all over the place. This was a place where the freed slaves would go to get an education. They would send their kids there so that they could become familiar. I'm part of this tradition. My family didn't go to a freedmen's school. My father immigrated from Mexico in 1950. He was a shoe shine boy. That's what he did for his job in Mexico. He came to Minneapolis, some family sponsored him, and eventually he got his PhD. And then he spawned 3 kids. I'm one of them, my brother's the other, and my sister the other. We all have our PhDs. We all work in the California State University system. We're all PhDs. But we saw life, he saw life, they saw life as a way to make their lives better. Now I'm going to show you a series of slides now. It's about 4 different slides I'm going to show you. And I want you to see I want you to think about what you notice about these slides. Why are they the same? How are they different? Okay? How are they the same? How are they different? All right? And it's all around the same time period. This is a Boston Latin school, Boston, Massachusetts. Latin, 1890. Did you do your Latin lessons today? Next slide. Let's see if I can go to full screen again. Maybe we are survived it. Nope. Okay. Inuit boarding school. Where do the Inuit live? A lot of people call them Eskimos, but they call themselves the Inuit. This is an Inuit boarding school. You're an Inuit. You're living out there on the tundra, hunting seals alongside the polar bear. You have all your religion. You have a kid. The state comes, grabs your kid, takes him to a boarding school. Teach him English. Teach him the way of the world. 1904. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Navajo girls. This photo is called Just Arrived. These girls on the bottom had never seen a white man before. They were born out of the desert. They had sheep, they had horses, they grew corn. The Bureau of Indian Affairs went out, grabbed the kids, brought them to school, teach them to read and write. Left their culture, left their religion, all behind. Orange County, California, our backyard. I know a lot of you are from Orange County. They had some great schools. They had a Mexican school in 1930. You had to have special qualifications to be able to go to that school. White teacher. Big range of kids' ages, I think. There's even some boys there. Tuskegee University, 1902. Professor. White professor. All the kids, black kids. So, 1870, the Civil War finished a few years ago. These kids might have experienced the Civil War. Or for sure their parents did, right? They may be the children of freed slaves going to school. But you know what? If you had some money, if you were living in the North, you probably had access to it. So what is it about these slides that are the same and that are different? With somebody sitting next to you, talk about that. Okay, I'm going to call on somebody, so come up with an answer. Boston Latin School, Inuit boarding school, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Orange County, California, Tuskegee University. Are we ready to move on? Okay, what's something that connects all these things together? Joshua Diesel. Where are you, Joshua? Raise your hand. Are you here, Joshua? Hey, Joshua, how you doing? What connects these things together, man?
I would just say that it shows like a changing in the culture.
What change?
Just moving to more of an organized classroom setting.
Okay, yeah, that's very good. I hadn't noticed that before. But you're right, much more organized setting, right? The institution becomes very formalized, right? There are actually steps that need to happen. Let's reach back into that area. Catherine Reedy. Where are you, Catherine? Hi, Catherine. Okay, right over there. Catherine, what else did you notice that's similar to them? Practice with your friends. There's a mic right there, Catherine. Let's look at the pictures again. really sorry about the technical problems. The Navajo girls, the Inuit kids, the Boston Latin School. Yes?
There's like an increase in not technology, but like they're moving towards having like like lights and like chalkboards and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Much more familiar to the kinds of things that we see in the classroom, right? Okay. So here in this particular picture, we see a blackboard. This is actually a physics lab, right? So these kids are doing physics experiments. Kids, look at those kids, all white males, 15, 16 years old. But definitely the trappings. Oh, there's the clock on the wall. They probably even had bells. There's the writing on the board. You can imagine the master teacher up there writing very carefully those words up there, and the kids would have to copy everything down from the board, just like with PowerPoint, just like you're doing right now. Okay? Here, a very formal institution. The kids lived here. They had a set curriculum mandated by the state that the students would have to do. There are lots and lots of stories about these kids that were taken from their homes out in the wilderness and brought into schools, the suffering that they experienced at the hands of the nuns or the teachers, or just their experiences of culture shock. But, you're 5 years old, someone walks into your house and says, your culture, what you value is not important. I'm going to take you to another school so that you can learn another culture. That would be shocking. Same thing here too. Right? Ah, very formal. School pictures, right? You probably have some of these at home. You can imagine all these children sitting there taking this picture, right? All have to get up there, sit very still. We're going to take a picture. Then at university, you have to wear a suit and a tie to be in class. Mostly boys, a few girls in there. But the other thing you notice is that they're all the same, right? Here, all these folks are of the same color, the same race. Here too, here too. And the other two slides, the same thing too. So during the time when this was going on, we had special schools. We had schools that if you were of a certain ethnicity, you would go to. If you knew a certain language, you would go to. And we increased our literacy rates during that time. In fact, it happened all over the United States. All of the immigrants that were coming were affected by this. This family, Mammy Tape is her name, that girl right there. She lived in San Francisco, liberal San Francisco. And she was told that she needed to go to a school on the other side of town. Her father said, no, I want to take you to the school that's just around the corner here. And they didn't let her in. They passed a law, the school board in San Francisco at this time passed a law that said, if you are a Chinese immigrant, then you cannot go to these schools. We're going to create a special school for you. You were isolated from the rest of the group. And you were expected to learn. That's what happened during that time period too. Huge decreases in the illiteracy rates, but segregation. People went to different schools to learn. Probably some of your ancestors, if you had folks who came across to Ellis Island, if you can track people down to that time, or maybe you're of Portuguese descent and you lived here on the California coast, there were special schools for your families that you would go to until you reached a point where you could live on your own. But you were segregated. Okay? And then this happened. In about 1954, a law was passed. President Eisenhower signed it into law that you could not ban students from going to school based on their background or their language. And this picture right here is from Little Rock, Arkansas. And if you go on YouTube, there are hundreds of videos there that kind of describe what happened. They had to actually bring in the National Guard to protect people during that time. Because these students who wanted to go to school were not allowed to. The children who lived at the school blocked their way. And so they had to bring in the National Guard, the Army, to be able to move them in. And, you know, if you walked around town during that time, you would see this. No dogs, Negroes, or Mexicans. I never saw any of this, but my family, my parents, they saw this stuff. They saw this happening. It wasn't that long ago. Here's another little girl who had to be escorted into school to kind of dissolve the segregation issue that was going on. And next time I'm going to show you a great little video clip about this particular piece. The legislation was called Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. And this is Ms. Brown now today in front of the school that she tried to get into. We said separate schools for kids, but we said separate was not equal. So, I posit to you today that if we look back at the history of schools, what we see is that a lot of the trappings that you have in your schools started way back in the day when you got caned, when you didn't bring your tablet to school, or you messed up the clay. A lot of those things are still in place today, all those kinds of features. And nothing really has changed since then, right? You still have teachers, you still have people who are experts up here on top telling you what you need to know, and you're busy writing it down. We saw that in the Renaissance time, during the time of Christopher Columbus, and we saw it during the colonial period, and we saw it in the current period. So, did anything change? Well, you might say, well, more people have access to education. Oh yeah, maybe the pupils changed. Maybe that's the thing that changed the most, was that the pupils changed. But if you look at this, I still argue that it's very selective, the kinds of folks who have access to education. And you know, what's missing here, I have this information by ethnicity, but you know what's a stronger marker for whether or not you're successful? It's whether you have money. It's whether your parents went to college. That's the biggest predictor of whether you're going to drop out of high school and go to college. Did your parents go to college? Did your parents have money? Those are the biggest predictors. And it just so happens that when you look at the groups like the Hispanics or the blacks or the American Indians, they also tend to be the very poor. But it's not just by ethnicity, it's by class as well. So back in the time of the Renaissance, we had this situation where the nobility, the king's kids, they got to be able to go to school, but the peasants didn't. It's still the same today. Just the peasants look different. They work at 7-Eleven. Maybe they work on the farms. It's the same sort of thing. It's still in place. So I argue things haven't changed. But I do think that things will change. And things are going to change because of the way you look at things. And the things are going to change are who's the teacher, the institution, the trappings of school. There's going to be very significant changes. Okay, next on Wednesday, when you come to class, there's 2 videos I want you to watch. One by Noam Chomsky and another one by Sir Ken Robinson. You need to watch them. Don't get out of your seats yet. Just wait one more second. Let me finish, all right? And then I'll dismiss you. We're going to actually leave early. I want you to watch those 2 videos, and I want you to think about how you could make school a better place. Because I'm going to ask you to think about how you would make school a better place. Right? So watch those videos. And the final thing is 126 of you completed the survey out of 760. So, you know, you look at 7 people in a row, 1 person finished it. Okay? So I'm going to turn that back on. I'd like you to complete the survey. It's quick. You know, you'll be able to do this. Watch the videos. We'll see you. Is there anything else, John? We'll see you next time. Thank you very much.